I'll throw this one up here. This is actually what sort of inspired my topic choice today. This has been making the rounds. And yes, that's a chick. Has been making the rounds not only on TikTok but also on Twitter. And to put it mildly, it's gone viral. In fact, when I commented about this, I basically just like copied the picture and put it up in another tweet on my own. And I think it's at 275,000 views right now. I don't know if that actually I think 1 million makes it viral, right? But it's got a lot of engagement. Let's just put it that way. And so this was the message. Okay. So, of course, she feels like she has to tell everybody about this. My husband is making us fly home from our honeymoon after one day because he found out I sent my ex a simple goodbye text on the morning of our wedding. It was a goodbye text, for goodness sake, not an I will always love you text, not a drop everything and meet me at the altar text. I needed to say goodbye to have closure on the unmarried part of my life. Please tell my sensitive, nostalgic girlies, please tell me my sensitive, nostalgic girlies understand. Okay. So my take on this, and I put this in my tweet, was that I'm like, this guy didn't go far enough, quite honestly, like to get back on the plane and say, fuck it, I'm out. He needs an annulment, basically, is what he needs. He needs zero tolerance. And I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised to find out that a lot of people agreed with that. And in fact, not even just people in the manosphere, but just like women in general were saying, like, why was this? So where was the closure before you even decided to say I do, or like, yes, I'll marry you, when you were his fiance, right? And quite honestly, I think that if you're going to set boundaries in your relationships, one of those boundaries only mean something when those boundaries have teeth. And you can't explain boundaries, but boundaries are something that have to be demonstrated. They can't be explicated. Thanks, Mike. Mike stole my line. Demonstrate, not explicate. He just did a tweet about that. I was going to give him shit, but I won't give him shit. But boundaries are something that have to be demonstrated. They cannot be. You can't, because when you talk about boundaries, I think a lot of people say, well, if you don't discuss the boundaries, if you don't tell what the rules are, then they're, when they break them, you can't expect people to know what you have to have this open communication shit. And I'm of the opinion that that's kind of bullshit. And while I do understand the logic behind it, it's really negotiation is what it is. And I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times I have actually had to establish or like vocalize a boundary with my wife in the last 28 years. And I'll tell you the story about that if you'd like, because I'm a really good storyteller, right? But before I do, I have to give you the example that I usually talk about when this is a very, very, very common situation. Yeah, thank you. I'm fairly sure. Yeah, Steven Crowder can't be bought either. Thank God, right? Boundaries have to have teeth. They have to have that. There has to be a sharpened knife somewhere. There has to be consequences, because if all you ever do is talk about boundaries, that's all it is talk. And what will happen is those boundaries will be tested, they'll be passed, they'll be crossed. If you forgive after that, if there's not some sort of like zero tolerance, if there's not a tolerance, a line in the sand, right? If there's not a thin red line, then you might as well not even have the conversation. That's why I keep saying that it's not about the conversation. It's not about like, you need to have open communication. Well, yeah, I hate the fucking line about open communication, because it presumes that all you have to do is just be talking and be communicating. It's like, no, it's what you're communicating. It's not that you're communicating. That's easy. I can talk to anybody, right? It's what's coming. What are the words coming out of my mouth? What is the information that's being transferred? It's the same thing when I see, and Andrew Wilson falls into this trap now and then, but not on his own accord, but like he falls in this trap. I have too. So, mea culpa as well. Is that when you sort of get yourself sort of worked up and you get sort of emotionally involved in sort of an exchange, you don't understand that the 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 information that's being passed is not about the tone of the information. It's the information itself. So I love it when women go, well, Rollo, people would really they would listen to you more, Rollo, if you said it like you were talking to a fourth grader, right? Like you're the teacher. Okay, everybody sit around. We're going to use our inside voices now, and we're going to talk about hypergamy and how women alpha fucks and beta bucks. And if we talked about that and we delivered it in this nice, sweet, syrupy, saccharine, tone, that women would be more open to listening to what you have to say. And it's like, no, it's not. It's what the fuck you're saying. That's offensive. It's not how it's delivered. And so, like, when Andrew Wilson has a very, let's just say, rough around the edges delivery, and when he makes these comments to the girls on whatever podcast, that's almost always the same. That's almost always the first thing that comes out of the mouth. Your tone could be different, and it's basically just tone policing at that point. But it's not even tone policing. It's the fact of what he's saying. They don't have it causes a cognitive dissonance that they just simply don't have any way to cope with, or they don't have any way to sort of like to resolve that cognitive dissonance, because you get to a point where it's like your hypocrisy or whatever it is that you've been talking about is so blatant and is so obvious that you don't have a comeback for it. The first thing, the first resort you're going to use is, how is this being delivered? Am I feeling attacked by this? Is he being snarky? And women will use snark in a sec. Imagine this. Imagine me like having to deal with sort of like a what I would presume would be like sort of an empirical debate, but like everything that's being thrown at me by a woman is like, wow, you and your little friends at the Red Pill and your little group and your little podcast and your little this, and like, if it's this sort of constant snark going on, if I stopped and say, you know what, you would be more convincing if you would just drop the snark and your tone was different. Imagine me, right, trying to say what the first resort for most women is, which is like, your tone could be different, right? And if I was to say that, it's a sign of weakness. Like, oh, you can't take it on the chin. You're not a real man. You can't, you can't knuckle under. What are you afraid? Were you threatened by a strong, independent woman? Those would be the answers, right? So there's always going to be that sort of disconnect between men and women when talking about these things. But the short version of this, or I should say the easier way to understand boundaries, I think, is when I have guys asking me about, this is like one of the most common scenarios is Rollo, I have a girlfriend, or I have a wife or whatever, and she hit me up just the other day, came up to me and she says, hey, me and some of the girls want to go to a girls' night out, or we want to go to a Vegas weekend with the girls. Are you okay with that? And whenever I say that, like, okay, so I'm going to tell you what my standard answer is for that. So when that conversation happens, what I got, this is me spitballing. I'm not saying this is what I would do. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of advice here. Okay, is I would say, yes, go right ahead, but please, you enjoy yourself, have a good time. You want to go do you really want to go do this, right? Yeah, I do. I want to go with the girls, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. And say, would you like me to help you pack? Would you, what would you, be completely, diplomatic about the whole thing. And the moment she's out the door, you go and grab all of her shit and you take it and you put it in boxes and you put it out on the sidewalk and you change the locks on the doors. So when she comes back, there has been a line that has been crossed. There's no uncertainty about it. A line has been crossed, and there has to be some sort of consequences for crossing that line. I say, well, you said you were okay with it. I said it was okay for you to go do that, but there you've just basically crossed a line that you should have known about in the first place. And so at some point, there's a test for boundaries that people should know, and then there's the ones that like have to be vocalized. And I don't even think there that many need to be vocalized. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're in a relationship, whether it's a business relationship or a personal relationship, or it's with your wife or your girlfriend or whatever else, that relationship, the quality and the health of that relationship, the maintenance of that relationship depends on a mutual desire for the other person. Understand, like the reason why I say this, and people go, "Oh, that's pretty harsh, Rollo. Couldn't you just tell her no?" You could, but now the first thing that's going to come out of her mouth is saying, "Well, he won't let me go because he's insecure. He thinks I'm going to go fuck people in Vegas with you guys." Which, why else are you going to Vegas with your girlfriends, right? I understand that. Why do you want to go to Vegas with your girlfriends? Why do you want to go do those things? Why is it a concept in your head that it's a better time and it's more fun and it's going to be a better deal, it's going to be a better experience to go and do that than it would be to say go out with a guy who you profess to be in love with, or maybe you've been married to? Why would that be something you want and desire to go do, instead of saying, "No, the girls are going to go to Las Vegas, but it doesn't sound like a really good time. Hey, you want to go fuck in a hotel tonight or something like that? Or what, do you want to go have sushi and go have a date? Like, I would much rather be with you." Right? That's the concept. That's the idea. That's the germ of the idea right there. And it took me kind of a long time to get to this, because if you would have asked me, I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I probably would have said something like, "Well, you need to have a discussion about it, and you need to like establish like boundaries from the very beginning," right? Well, those boundaries should be something that are discovered along the way as a part of your genuine desire. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're in a relationship and people say, "Well, well, I can't be a mind reader." No, but you should know your partner and know that person, whether it's a bit. And by the way, this is not just an intimate partner. This can be a business partner, right? You should know your partner, or know your wife, know your spouse, know your intimate, other well enough to know that that's probably a fucking boundary. He probably wouldn't like it if I wanted to go do something like it. You know what? I don't even, it's not even a concept. It's not even an afterthought. It doesn't even enter my brain now to do certain things, because I know that it will be crossing that fucking line. Like, if I was to say, "Well, honey, I'm going to go spend the night with these girls from Access Vegas, and we're just going to go, we got a new hotel and a suite up here and everything like that, and I'm just going to crash there tonight. Okay. I'll be, I already know that's probably not a good idea. That's probably not where I want to. Could I go do it? Sure, I could go do it. But it's probably going to be a boundary. It's probably something that's already established. I never had a conversation with my wife about that. She's never, if she said, "Hey, I'm going to go hang out with these Chippendales dancers and I'm going to spend the night at the hotel with these guys. Don't worry, but nothing's going to happen. I just want to sleep it off or whatever, and I'll be back in the morning." Like, if I was to get that, like, that's a fucking boundary, and that's not even something that has to be vocalized. It's not something that has to be like it's not something that has to be discussed, because you should know your partner well enough to know what those fucking boundaries are in the first place. And you don't want to cross those boundaries because you don't want to have to deal with the consequences of those boundaries in the first place. Or it's something that doesn't even enter into your thought process, because it's just something that's so outside of the realm of like conceivability that you would never even consider doing something like that. So yeah, there are certain things that you should fucking know are a boundary without having to discuss them. I whenever I have this conversation about like boundaries and stuff, I talk about like how my dad had boundaries. My dad was a harsh motherfucker for a while. Okay. Like, especially when he was a single dad raising two boys, my brother and I, right? My mom left when we were young. Okay. Then no, that's not because, that explains why Rollo's all fucked up. No, the fact of the matter is my father, as rare as this is, right? Usually it's the single mother that is raising the child. My dad was a single father and raised me and my brother, such as it was. We were Gen X, we were latchkey kids, so we really kind of raised ourselves. But we did have a healthy respect for the boundaries that my father had in place, and my dad didn't have to tell us what those fucking boundaries were. We already knew. If we were to go and do something, we were to do anything like any kind of like semi-criminal activity, we were probably going to get the fucking belt. Okay. We were probably going to get beat for something like that. That's back when you could actually hit a kid with a fucking belt on your bare ass. Okay. And so we got to the point, and I know anybody from Gen X understand. I know Aaron Clary would probably understand this, but it got to the point where if you have a sort of a dominant my dad was anything but alpha, but he did know how to fucking run a tight ship. He was ex-Navy. Okay. So it got to the point where if we were mouthing off or if we were like acting out, my brother and I were acting out, my dad could give us that look. He would just be like, I can't even do it right. I can just be like, but do this guy right here. So you're like, no words, just like expressionless, just like fucking Judge Dredd, dude. I mean, exactly like that, right? And we sure the fuck knew what that look meant. That no discussion. We were crossing a boundary at that time, and if we kept crossing that fucking boundary, there was going to be hell to pay. And we didn't have to say they're wordless. No tone policing. No, can you sweeten up that fucking message a little bit more? No, we knew what that was, and we knew if we kept it up when we got back home, where maybe we were like on Thanksgiving or some shit like that. If we were acting out and Dad shot us the look, we were like, yes, sir. Right away, sir. Latino families, when Dad's the alpha, man, he's the one that runs the fucking show, man. He shoots you that look, and you know what that look means. And that's about, again, as I said, boundaries and all this stuff doesn't have to be intimate boundaries. It doesn't have to be like, you're fucking that person, whatever. It can be in the military. It could be your place of work. It could be your family, as I was saying before. So my dad, like I said, would give us that fucking look, the Judge Dredd look. We were just like, okay, guess we wouldn't even know we crossed the boundary. Sometimes we'd be like, oh, okay, well, we don't have to discuss that thing. Okay, Dad, we're good. Everything's cool. Don't fuck us up. Don't get out the belt. So we knew, and I'm not saying like you have to get that way with your wife where it's like, she starts acting out. Like, for instance, hey, I want to go on this girls' night out, and you just be like Stone Cold Steve Austin. But the fact of the matter is that there should be things. If a person is that into you, if they have genuine desire for you, they should know, hey, you know what? I think that's a boundary. I'm not gonna. That's a place I'm not willing to go, because I have enough respect for my husband. I have enough respect for my wife that I know that's probably not a good thing for me to do. I don't know if I want to go on girls' night out. Don't know that I want to go spend night. You know what? I think I'm going to go spend the night at the Sapphire Strip Club. Even if I could be working there, but this the same thing applies. You get that. You get the idea. But the talking about it, the discussing about it, this all comes from sort of this touchy-feely kind of new age, egalitarian. So, well, because it comes from really what I've called in the past is sort of this mentality of the blank slate, that if everybody is the same and we all are these co-equal, co-rational, cooperative, everything's on the men and women are just the same, except we have a little bit different plumbing and that kind of stuff, then we should all be able to just sit down at the negotiation table and say, okay, well, let's see. I don't want you going to girls' night out. And because what happens is when you have those conversations, when you start negotiating, you're technically negotiating desire. And we all know where that goes, right? You cannot negotiate genuine desire. Because if you try to negotiate, even when you think you're negotiating genuine desire, you are only negotiating for obligated compliance. So that's why I said, like, when your wife or your girlfriend says, hey, I want to go on a girls' night out, or I want to go to Vegas for a girls' weekend in Vegas, you take all her shit and you put it out on the porch or wherever on the sidewalk. Because the desire to go do that is something that seems like a good idea. And that's the problem. It's not her going and doing it. I'm like, hey, you want to go? In fact, if anything, she's doing you a favor, right? She's telling you, hey, I'm not as into you as I think. And so this seems like a better idea than it is to actually be with the person that I love on the weekend. Right? And so by doing that, you're establishing a boundary. And as I said before, boundaries have to have teeth. The teeth in this situation is I change all the locks. I put all the shit out there. Bye. End of relationship. Period. And you should have known that. Because you would have known that if you had enough love and desire and genuine interest in me to know that that's a fucking boundary to begin with. I'm going to get that look from dad if I do these things. You should, like, we sure, like, there was things that my brother and I wouldn't do because we knew that that would be, even if we never had that discussed ever in our lives. My dad said, you know, okay, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. Like, we never had that conversation. It was just like, if you do that, you get fucking hit. You get pain. Okay. Won't do that. And you start to learn through the course of trial and error what is a boundary and what is not a boundary. That's how you learn what boundaries are. That's how boundaries are enforced. That's how I'm not saying you have to like throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm just saying that there has to be a consequence, and you're only going to learn from those consequences.